What if everything you believed to be love was just a well-told lie? Imagine dedicating your life to someone, only to discover that this person shares their deepest passions with someone else, and worse, refuses to do so with you. This is the story of Alberto, a 75-year-old man who found an unexpected love, but also a betrayal that would change his life forever. Alberto had always believed that his chance to experience a great passion was in the past. A widower for over a decade, he carried memories of a true love, but no longer expected fate to bring him a new story. That was when he met Juliana. She was only 35, a woman full of energy, with a sparkle in her eyes that made time seem to rewind. They met at a literature lecture, an environment they both loved. Alberto spoke passionately about the classics, while Juliana listened, fascinated. The connection was instant. Despite the age difference, the enchantment was mutual. Juliana admired the way Alberto saw life, the calmness in his storytelling, and the wisdom that shone through his every word. For him, it felt like going back in time, feeling young again. It didn't take long for the two to dive into a relationship. Friends and family found it strange. Comments arose. What does such a young woman see in a man his age? But Alberto ignored the doubts. For the first time in years, he felt alive. Each day with Juliana was a renewal. Dinners filled with deep conversations, spontaneous outings, and moments of intimacy that seemed to defy time. But soon, the first signs began to appear. There was something about the way Juliana avoided certain topics, small details like prolonged silences or vague excuses when he suggested more intimate plans. At first, Alberto paid no mind. After all, everyone has their boundaries, and he didn't want to pressure her. But his intuition grew louder. Whenever he suggested new ways to explore pleasure, Juliana always pulled away. She would smile, avert her gaze, and say she didn't feel comfortable. Alberto respected that, but something felt off. After all, why did a woman so full of life seem so distant in those moments? What he didn't know was that Juliana was hiding a secret. And that secret would soon change his life forever. While Alberto saw in Juliana a new chance at love, she carried a desire she would never share with him. From the beginning of their relationship, Juliana felt that something was missing. She enjoyed the affection and security that Alberto provided, but at the same time, she couldn't ignore what truly made her feel alive. And that was how Lucas entered her life. A 29-year-old man, full of energy and audacity. What started as a casual flirtation quickly turned into something Juliana couldn't walk away from. With Lucas, she was free. She did everything she wanted, without fear of judgment. And most of all, she explored a pleasure she adamantly refused to share with Alberto. With each clandestine encounter, the passion between her and Lucas grew. Desire consumed her body, and no matter how guilty she felt coming home to Alberto, she couldn't stop. What was love for Alberto was mere convenience for Juliana. She loved the stability he offered, the way he made her feel protected, but her true desire lay elsewhere. And the more she gave herself to Lucas, the further she drifted from Alberto. He began to notice the changes, small details, like the way Juliana avoided deep conversations, the moments she suspiciously checked her phone, the odd hours she claimed to be busy. At first, he tried to ignore it. Maybe it was just a phase, something temporary, but his intuition said otherwise. And when Juliana once again refused something he longed to experience in their relationship, Alberto felt that he was facing a truth he didn't want to see. There was someone else, but he had no proof, and he didn't know that very soon. His suspicions would turn into a crushing certainty. Doubt consumed Alberto from within. He tried to convince himself that it was all in his head, but every new behavior from Juliana reinforced his fears. The excuses became more forced. Her gaze avoided his. And the most painful part, he felt that the woman he loved was no longer there. Then came that night. Juliana fell asleep early, exhausted after a day full of commitments. But Alberto couldn't sleep. His mind replayed all the strange moments from the past weeks, trying to piece the puzzle together. Then, he looked at the nightstand. Juliana's phone was right there, within his reach. His heart pounded. He had never done anything like this before. But now, he needed answers. He needed to know the truth, no matter how much it hurt. With trembling hands, he picked up the phone. The screen lit up. His finger slid. The phone was unlocked, and in that instant, his life changed. The messages were all there. There were dozens. Texts filled with desire, intimacy, secrets he never imagined Juliana could share with someone else. And there, without a shadow of a doubt, was the truth. She was cheating on Alberto. And not just cheating. She was living a parallel love. The impact was like a knife to the chest. Alberto felt the air leave his lungs. His vision blurred. His hands trembled as he continued scrolling through messages that weren't meant for him. She said things she had never said to him. Confessed desires she had always denied in their relationship. And worse, she did with another what she refused to do with him. The betrayal wasn't just physical, it was emotional. It was the kind of pain that can't be measured. Alberto stood there, holding that phone as if it were a bomb about to explode. Because, in a way, it was. What now? How could he face Juliana after this? And above all, how could he move forward, knowing that the love he believed to be real was never what it seemed? By the next morning, he would have his answer. The confrontation was inevitable, and nothing would ever be the same again. The sun had barely risen when Alberto got up. He hadn't slept that night. The pain of the discovery weighed on his chest like a crushing force. But now, he needed answers. He needed to face Juliana. When she woke up, she found Alberto sitting in the living room. Her phone was on the table. He said nothing. He just looked at her, a look filled with pain, disappointment, and an unbearable silence. A chill ran down Juliana's spine. "What's wrong?" she asked, trying to sound natural. Alberto picked up the phone, unlocked it, opened the messages, turned the screen toward her. The impact was immediate. Juliana turned pale. Her eyes darted across the words she had written, words that now turned against her like sharp blades. "Are you going to tell me what's going on?" Alberto asked, his voice hoarse, heavy with a pain she had never heard before. Juliana swallowed hard. Her mind raced, searching for a way out. This isn't what it looks like." But even she knew how empty those words sounded. Alberto let the phone drop onto the table and took a deep breath. "Then explain to me. How exactly is this not what it looks like?" Juliana hesitated. She tried to make excuses, but Alberto's gaze stripped away every lie, and then the truth slipped out. "I never wanted to hurt you," she began, her voice trembling, "but I feel alive with him." Alberto closed his eyes for a moment. He already knew, but hearing it from her hurt even more. "So what am I to you? A shelter? A safe harbor? While you live your real life somewhere else?" Juliana started crying. She didn't want to lose Alberto, but she also didn't want to give up Lucas. "I love the way you treat me, the security you give me, but I can't deny that what I feel for him is different." Something inside Alberto shattered. He had spent so much time ignoring the signs, trying to convince himself that Juliana was just reserved, that his intuition was wrong. But now, the truth was right there, raw and undeniable, and he had to make a decision, stay and accept the scraps of love she was willing to offer, or walk away, even if it meant starting over from scratch. At that moment, he knew the answer. Without another word, he stood up, grabbed his things, and walked out the door. Juliana called after him, but Alberto didn't look back. Because, for the first time, he was choosing himself. And that was the hardest and most liberating decision he had ever made. The following days were a blur. Alberto felt an emptiness that seemed unbearable. Juliana's memories were everywhere. Her perfume still lingered on the pillow, traces of her presence scattered around the house. The betrayal wasn't just a break in trust. It was a blow to his self-esteem, to his sense of self. He wondered, how had he let this happen? How had he been so naive as to believe that love could overlook the obvious differences between them? For weeks, he isolated himself. The phone rang, messages came in, but he didn't respond. Friends tried to cheer him up, but he didn't want to listen. Until one day, as he looked at himself in the mirror, he realized something. He couldn't let this betrayal define him. He had overcome losses before, and somehow he had survived, and this time wouldn't be any different. That's when he decided to do something he hadn't done in years. He left the house. He walked to a nearby cafe and simply watched people. The world kept spinning. Life hadn't stopped just because he suffered a heartbreak. And in that moment, he realized something essential. Life had only crushed him because he had allowed it to. That realization led him to a support group for seniors. At first, he hesitated. He didn't want to open up. But little by little, he started listening to the stories of others and realized he wasn't alone. It was in that group that he met Clara, a 68-year-old woman with a life story marked by challenges but also resilience. Their connection grew slowly, without rush, without unrealistic expectations. This time, there were no illusions, no pursuit of lost youth or attempts to defy time. There were just two hearts that understood each other. Meanwhile, Juliana faced the consequences of her choices. Despite the initial passion, Lucas never wanted a serious commitment. He left her, without ceremony, as soon as the excitement faded. And when Juliana tried to go back to Alberto, she found only silence, because he had already moved on, and this time, it was toward something real. Time passed. The wounds were still there, but they no longer hurt like before. Alberto had learned to move forward, and more than that, he had learned from the pain. Beside Clara, he rediscovered the simple joys of life, calm conversations, sincere laughter, and unhurried moments. He realized that true love doesn't have to be intense and overwhelming all the time. It needs to be light, simple, reciprocal. And that reflection led him to a new project, turning his experience into words. Alberto spent months writing a book. He titled it New Beginnings That Time Can't Erase, a story about love, loss, and rebuilding. Each page carried not only his pain, but also his growth. And to his surprise, the book became a success among older readers. People who, like him, once believed that love was a closed chapter in their lives, but who, after reading his story, realized that it's never too late to start over. Meanwhile, Juliana faced her own personal hell. Lucas, the passion she thought was uncontrollable, vanished without warning. Without desire, without adrenaline, without the mystery of betrayal, there was nothing left. She tried to reconnect with Alberto, but he was no longer there for her. Juliana learned the hard way that some choices can't be undone, and that when you lose something valuable, there isn't always a second chance. Now we want to hear from you. Have you or someone you know been through a similar situation? How do you think Alberto should have reacted? Share your thoughts in the comments. If this story made you reflect, like this video and subscribe to the channel for more impactful stories. See you next time.